do some furniture rearranging here. This is the talk on getting the best deal in life insurance. So we're here to tell you all about the strategies to make sure that you have the best whole life you can possibly. Just kidding. No, this is the panel talk. I'm the moderator, Chris King from Northwestern Mutual. We're just going to be talking really about a day in the life of cybersecurity professional. We're not going to say insurance, we're not going to do anything like that. But really, I have these fine individuals here from NM that are some of our best cyber professionals that we have. They're going to share their experiences, share kind of their day-to-day and what they work on, their challenges, and also any sort of insights that they have as they grow in their careers at NM. So without further ado, I have Chris Beckett here. I have Rachel Murray, and I have Chester LeBron, all part of the NM team. So we're going to go through kind of a question and answer for a couple questions, and then open it to the audience, try and keep it pretty interactive. All right, let's get started. So for the first question, so we'll start with you, Chris, and then we'll kind of move along. What is your role, and what does your day-to-day look like from your perspective?
Sure. So Chris Beckett, I am a lead cyber threat hunter at NM. So I kind of spend my time in the middle of detection engineering, threat intelligence, and our incident response team. So I get to dabble in all that. It's all really awesome. Day to day though, I think I spend a lot of time doing like open source, keeping an eye on Twitter, getting a pulse on what's going on, and trying to find a way to work with the threat intel folks to funnel that to our detection engineering group, incident responders, making sure we're covered for all the right things.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Murray, and I am on our Insider Risk and Digital Forensics team at Northwestern Mutual. So a day in my life, it can be a little bit different every day, but I'm primarily focused on our data loss prevention, so making sure data that is proprietary to Northwestern Mutual remains internal. I also am involved with some of our security assessments, so making sure all of our tooling that we're using, whether it be open source or paid, is going through the proper security channels. And I also help with insider investigation, so in a case that an investigation pops up with someone internal, our team will get engaged.
So my name is Chester LeBron. I am a lead on our threat detection and response team. Work very closely with Chris. Also sit right next to Rachel. So I'm really on the response side, but I do kind of both. So detection, building, and obviously my day-to-day is a lot of responding to alerts and reviewing detections and following up on any leads. Some of the more fun things to do is building detection. So in the last few years, I've kind of focused on cloud threat detection and response and trying to build that out. It's been a very interesting journey. Probably can touch on it later, but it's kind of one of those taps on the shoulder type of thing. Knew nothing about cloud, and since then kind of changed the trajectory of my career. So.
Just going back to the day-to-day question, is there anything that changes? Like, is every day the same? Is it kind of the same thing that happens, or are there things that change that make each day a little more exciting? Anyone can answer that one.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of constants. So like reviewing detections, for example, or alerts, that's pretty constant. But the thing that is different is that always leads down, very different paths, right? Like you may be following up on, phishing emails that might lead to, typical credential phishes, but then it might lead into like, well, this link leads to malware, and then what type of malware, and then like you start pulling on these threads and just hope that nothing falls right on top of you without you being able to step aside and actually see what is happening. So like there's some constant things that happen every day, but I would say like every day usually has some different twist, and you end up learning something new. Like I haven't had too many days where I was like, well, I did that exact same thing, the very exact same thing, like yesterday or the day before that. There's always something new that you end up learning, and you kind of have to stay on top of things.
I would also agree that every single day can be a little bit different. When I took this role, the first thing my boss said to me was, some days we're gonna be cleaning the fire truck, other days we're gonna be dealing with a 5 alarm fire. So just kind of keeping that mindset in place, knowing that every investigation is gonna be slightly different, kind of is one of the most exciting things about the role.
So obviously there's day-to-day and there's sort of like the cool stuff that you're passionate about, that you want to do. Can you share a little bit of like what you think is the coolest stuff that your team's working on, that you're working on? And then along those lines, what do you think helps lead to your team's success overall?
Sure. So I think I'm really fortunate in my role that I get to take a step back and look at the bigger picture sometimes. So I'm really all about doing the threat research and trying to find the fastest, cheapest, and most efficient ways to make like a real impact. So keeping an eye on the threat landscape. Perfect examples like initial access. So the past year there's been like a lot of trend towards moving towards archive files and link files to get into networks. So quickly trying to build detections for that, or hey, can we just not let ISO and IMG files open with an archive utility, right? Can we just break that effectively for our users? So really, really free, inexpensive change with tremendous impact. I love doing that kind of stuff. I love keeping an eye on the threat actors and trying to do choke point analysis, right? So where do they all fall back? What's the weak spot? And what can we do internally? How can I work with the appropriate teams to get that addressed? So things that lead to our success, I think it's ultimately relationships internally. I'm not going to have the knowledge to do all of it, and then having key contacts in the right areas of the business really goes a long way. Other stuff I'm worried about, or I'm interested in, that I think is really kind of game changing for us, is our detection engineering team is working on a detection as code effort, which I think is awesome. It's really helping us build this resilient detection engineering function where we can validate code changes so that one person isn't making a change in a vacuum, right? It's got multiple eyes on it, peer approval. We get to lint it, we get to make sure that the search is efficient and things like that. I think that's really, really awesome.
I think for us, kind of like Chris had said, one of the things that makes our team so successful, I think, is our communication. Each individual on our team does something slightly different, right? So we're all working on our different areas, and we all have our different specializations, but we're constantly communicating, whether it's sending someone a quick Slack message to see what they're working on, and kind of sharing investigations or things that are going on, just so everyone on the team can learn, regardless of that, if that is your specialty. So I think that's something that really helps us in the day-to-day. In terms of cool things that we are working on, it kind of depends on the day, right? So something might come up that's really exciting and cool. We're also working on ways to automate more things. So in terms of detecting things, as Chris had mentioned, we partner a lot with both Chris and Chester's team on some of those things. We're also, from a digital forensics side, looking at different ways to bring in more open source tools that can be used in specific portions of our investigations to help kind of get more granular. So that's kind of some of the stuff we're working on.
One of the things that we're working on, which is across a few teams, is risk-based alerting. So the concept of applying risk to individual detections, and maybe there's a few things like risk objects, what they're called. So maybe you want to apply risk to the IP, maybe you want to apply it to the host name, so on and so forth. And then once you build out a framework, which obviously means you have to have normalized data. But once you build out that framework, now you're not just saying well, this one detection popped and now we need to care, but there's multiple things that happen, and you start being able to track that across different thresholds. So maybe a few hours, 24 hours, a week, or 2 weeks. So it enables that type of alerting. So now you're not just saying this one thing happened, oh, we had execution for, I don't know, PowerShell or whatever. Now you're saying these sets of things happen, and now you have context to provide to somebody that's reviewing that, and then they can pull on different threads with more context, because in our role, you're trying to make the best decision as fast as possible, but as accurately as possible. And the more information and context that you have around that, the better. So that's a really huge effort that has a lot of moving pieces. That is really awesome. Going back to the other question, what would make your team successful? I mean, I think all of us probably feel this way. Everybody's really helpful. So like if, there's multiple things happening and you can't handle something, like you can ask for help, right? Like everybody's gonna be really helpful, which also allows for like cross-training and things like that. And then just having good leadership, I think, is critical. Like the trust aspect of it. Like it'd be pretty hard to do what you need to do without like knowing that you're empowered by your leadership. So I think that's a really huge piece to make your team successful.
And for those wondering about risk-based learning, there is a blog post from like 2019 or something that Splunk did on it, but not the only company. There's others that they're all doing similar type things. So if you're interested, just take a Google on that. So for our next question, so we kind of talked about the cool things we're working on. We kind of talked about the day-to-day a little bit. But what about the challenges? What are the things that you're seeing that are interesting from the perspective of the adversary? So whether it's interesting insider tactics or cyber threats that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, like what can you share that, generally speaking, that might be of interest to the audience?
Yeah, I think from an adversary's perspective, I think there's a lot of, I think, interesting and I dare to say cool trends that obviously I think are worth keeping an eye on. So Chris Merkel did a talk last night on MFA phishing. I think it's fascinating, just like the way that they are weaponizing this stuff so quickly and frankly how inexpensive it is. Like the bar to entry on this stuff is just absolutely ridiculous at this point. So I think that's really cool. I talked a little bit about the initial access stuff. I love just like sitting on Twitter and watching things like change by the hour and all the things that they try. Like they're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks and what doesn't. I just think it's really cool to see them like slowly like adapt. Like one group will try something, and then a couple others will follow, and they'll shift to something else the next week, right? So keeping an eye on how fastly that stuff changes is kind of the big challenge for me. But I to solve it. I think it's a data problem ultimately, right? Like detections that work well for some orgs might not work well for others. So trying to find things that work at scale, I think, is the fun part for me.
I think from an insider perspective, some of the trends that we're seeing, especially with our industry partners and even in kind of mainstream media, some of the things we're seeing are different individuals. Now with us being essentially, a lot of companies are working from home, right? We've transitioned from in-person to more remote environments, which bring on a different set of challenges, right? So a lot of companies are sharing, and we've even had articles from companies like Fortune or US News about insiders essentially being overemployed or working multiple jobs. So as we see those trends across the industry, it gives us kind of a good place to start looking and seeing how they're kind of pivoting with this new environment that we're in. So I find that very cool, and I'm sure we'll see it evolve as time comes, especially since this is a new direction that we're headed.
So I'm gonna give like the least sexiest answer, but it's always been a challenge, is like asset management. Just knowing, like, sometimes you don't have a lot of information to go off of. Like maybe you just have like a lead that you have like an IP and some weird stuff that happened, right? Like knowing like what that IP is attributed to sounds great, sounds easy, and it should be easy, but the reality is not. So like that's always, especially when you get into cloud, like that's a whole another thing. But it's a really hard thing to get right and to do it consistently, because things change all the time, right? Servers go up and down, right? So like I think that, especially on detection side, like when you want to build detections that aren't super high false positive or like just contributing noise, right? Having that data up front is very helpful, but it's doing it at scale, especially depending on the size of your company. If you're dealing with a few hundred machine servers, and that's probably not as difficult, but then once you scale it out 100-fold is very difficult. So I think that's a huge challenge, but if you're doing it right, like it reaps the benefits like 100-fold, right?
So for the, not quite the last question, almost last. What skills, so we talked about these other things that you're doing day to day, but you had to build these skills over time. What do you think are the most important skills for someone in your role? And how did you build that skill set?
Sure. So I guess for me, it's just being inquisitive, like knowing, being annoyed that you don't know how something works, and like the drive to really understand something. I think really goes a long way. Not taking things at face value, really trying to go deeper. I'd also say just communication skills in general, though. Like that'll take you a long way. Being able to have conversations with not only like your end users but leadership, being able to convey a message in a reasonable fashion, I think is often understated. I think the technical skills can be taught, but I think it can be much more difficult to teach that stuff like later on.
Yeah, I would also agree with that. I think the communication portion is extremely critical, especially, it doesn't really matter what kind of role you're doing in cybersecurity, you're always going to have to either communicate out an issue or talk to another individual. And going off of what Chris said too, I think, yes, you can learn those technical skills, but I think you also have to be willing to ask questions and be able to acknowledge when you don't know something. I know joining, a new role or a new field is always a little bit intimidating to be able to raise your hand and say, I don't know something. So being willing to jump in there, ask the question, it's gonna help you immensely. And I think for technical skills, it honestly really depends what you wanna do too. Like there are so many aspects of cybersecurity. I think that there's a spot for everyone. So it's just kind of figuring out where in cybersecurity you want to be, and kind of, tuning that skill set based on what you're interested in.
Communication is a great one, but since you guys said that, I won't take that one. I would say know thyself. If you don't know the way you learn best, then you're gonna have a hard time in this particular field picking things up quickly. And what I mean by that is, do you learn by verbal communication, right? Like somebody tells you something once and you're good. If so, you're in the right field because you'll be able to get in and out of meetings and learn things really quick by someone talking to you. If that's not it, do you learn by doing, right? Do you learn by watching? If you understand how you learn, then you can maximize, all the things that you will end up having to learn on day in and day out, and then picking up new things. You'll just do it faster. So that was something that I think I had to learn in college. Didn't really care so much in high school, unfortunately, but once I got to college, I was like, crap, this is a lot faster. There's way more content, so had to have some self-reflection. So I thought that was really beneficial, a beneficial skill or awareness skill that I picked up. The other thing I would say is, it's not necessarily a skill, but going back to passion, I would not have gotten hired if it was on raw skill, in technical skill. I know that, but having the passion to learn is really something that we look for, and you can see it, right? People light up genuinely, right, with their eyes and their facial expression, body language when they're talking about something that they're passionate about, right? For me, it'd be sports, cybersecurity. Don't tell my wife. But people light up, right? And it's really easy to see that, especially when you're doing an interview or whatever, you're just talking to somebody. So that passion is something you can't really teach. You either have a passion for something or you don't, but it does go a long way. So.
And just the last question before we go to the audience. What do you think the future of cybersecurity is? What should I mention ChatGPT? Is AI going to take our jobs? What do you guys think?
I think it would be silly to not embrace it. I would encourage people to start thinking about how that can help you do your job better than worry about being replaced. Like simple stuff. The other day I had to write regex for me that we talked about. Script deobfuscation has been something I've had good luck with. How to start the shell of a script for me, just really stupid stuff that saves me 5 or 10 minutes has been really awesome. Emails? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm sure all of you have seen the demo videos Microsoft put out recently, right, on the Office integrations and the Copilot stuff. I think that is just incredible. You know, I guess my one fear is that, you know, want to make sure that people know how to do this without the fancy AI tools. And I think we kind of fell into that route with some of the EDR products as well. So like, you know, knowing how to do this kind of stuff without that, I think is going to be crucial in the end. But I can't say I'm really worried about AI taking my job anytime soon.
One thing I will say, since you brought up emails, is yes, ChatGPT can help, but I think it's just as the importance of writing in this career too. You're either writing reports, you're writing, you know, communications to people, and just making sure you're kind of tuning those writing skills is definitely helpful. Now, in terms of ChatGPT, I think you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt and with reason behind it. You can't just, you know, jump in there fully. I agree with you. I don't think it's going to take our jobs, but I think it will definitely help us. But kind of going in and, you know, asking the questions. Personally, I've asked questions and kind of played around with how I'm wording it, and it's just, I think right now it's just a fun tool to play with, and we're all kind of learning together.
So I definitely think we should embrace AI. One thing I will say, going back to your other point though about knowing your tools, I think we're probably gonna have like a fork in the road at some point, because like there's more like, you know, SaaS, IaaS, all this other stuff coming out, and we're either gonna have a lot of people that just like, oh, I use this tool and like have no idea like what's really going on, or maybe people hopefully take this advice and like try to understand like what's really happening on the back end, and you know, what APIs are actually being called, and so on and so forth. Because I find it that like the more that we embrace this stuff, the less the people actually know what's going on. So that is a little bit scary, because to me we're just gonna end up with more misconfigurations and stuff like that, because we see that a lot, and that's often what leads to the B-word breaches. So like, I think there's going to be a divergence. So I say that to say, understand your tools, know how to use them. Things are going to break, know how to fix them. And I think we'll be all right. I'm not worried about our jobs anytime soon.
Awesome. Thank you for the fantastic answers and I think sharing with everyone here your experiences. So I want to offer up, we got a couple minutes, but they said not kicking us out. So if anyone in the audience has questions for any of these folks, feel free to yell them out now. Otherwise, you know, we can stay a little bit after and can have one-on-one questions if you prefer. So, anyone?
Don't be afraid now.
Bueller? Yeah.
Okay, so you touched on misconfiguration and how that continuously is going back to the reword. So, how do you tackle it?
That's a good question. There's vendors now that can help with that. I'm kidding. I think that goes back to like knowing your tools. Like there was another talk that we just got out of not long ago downstairs. I think it was a Cloud Ops Red team, and they were talking about like using the GUI to like set things up, right? And a lot of those are kind of building in default configurations that are good. So like if you understand like what's actually happening, then you can like stop those things as you are deploying it. And if you move a step back and you like start building infrastructure as code, for example, then you can just programmatically have those things happen. So I think that's ultimately going to be the answer is, you know, if you're not already deploying your code as infrastructure, or sorry, other way around, deploying your infrastructure as code, then you can just build those best practices in right away versus, and then like make it very easy to understand like when somebody's deviating from that pattern. So I think that's probably the best way to go about it. If you don't want to do that, then I guess you can certainly go with vendors or pay somebody to do that. But I think that's the best way.
Any other questions? Yep, in the back.
What are your favorite resources for keeping up with the latest things that are happening in the industry?
RIP Twitter. Twitter used to be really great. I still use it, depending on who's tweeting. But There's a ton of podcasts out there, blogs, sans. There's a book to me, like Red Canary, like the threat reports are still pretty good. Those are probably the ones that RSS feeds, stuff like that is pretty much how I'm keeping up. Talking with people who are much smarter than me. Those are pretty much my day-to-day things now.
I was just gonna say, I agree with you. A lot of my stuff I look at comes from SANS, whether it's through, their articles that they provide or through their webinars. I also focus a lot on learning new tools, so a lot of my stuff will be focused. So I will watch some videos from vendors or sign up for their webinars or trainings, but I think to your point, just talking to the people around you, I think it's really interesting for me to talk to someone who does something completely different so that I can kind of learn how their space connects with mine. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I'm really big into Twitter and Mastodon and things like that. You may work for a firm and be lucky that you have a paid intelligence provider, but not everyone has that. You can get a pretty good bang for your buck on Twitter. Just if you don't have an account, I would highly encourage you to get started. Build your following, right? Just start to collect the people that do research for security vendors, the people that are doing blue team work, red team work, purple team work, all the things. Cultivate that feed, and I think you will be more than in the know on what's going on day to day.
Yeah, so I actually have a pattern of how I do things. So if I see something on Twitter and I know that I can't read it, right? Like I tag it, bookmark it for a read now, read later, or that type of thing. And you gotta stay disciplined with it because you could obviously that could outpace you very quickly. But I have certain rhythms, like when I know I have 5 minutes of time, or I'm sitting down, just sit down, I'll go scroll through, give it 5 minutes, see if there's anything interesting. Do I have time to read it? No, put it right here, and then I have time in the morning before I get to work, before I check any emails, before anybody tells me that something's on fire. I'll go spend the time to read it. And as long as you're disciplined about it, that's a really good way to stay up on it. If you're not disciplined about it, then you're kind of just wasting time, but that's something that's worked for me.
Any other questions? All right. Well, we'll be up here if we have more. Thank you very much to all the panelists. And thank you all for coming.